Thank you all for coming here this evening. My name is Ariana Myers. I am the president of the Graduate History Association, and we're here tonight to express our desire that our friend and classmate return home to us, Wang Xiyue. Our community is incomplete without him home. Tonight's proceedings will consist of the testimonies of a number of people close to Wang Xiyue. Afterward, we would like to have no applause, please, and 5 seconds of silence, and then I will introduce the next speaker. After each of the testimonies, we'll conclude with a procession to Firestone Plaza, right through that archway right there. And that will also give us an opportunity to bond and process our thoughts and feelings together as a community. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker of tonight, Xiyue Wang, the wife of Wang Xiyue.
Thank you everyone for your support to Xiyue. At 2:20 a.m. August 7, 2016, I was awakened by my husband Wang Xiyue's call from Tehran. 3 weeks earlier, police had confiscated his passport and the laptop. They questioned him several times and finally told him that they were sending him to the airport and he should leave the country immediately. He planned to purchase a ticket home and said he would call me back when he arrived at the airport. Anxiously waiting for his call back, I sent him a text message that went unanswered. After many days, when I finally learned that he was being held in Evan prison, I became obsessed with Google Earth. I zoomed in to examine the landscape and the clusters of the gray architecture, as if I could find him behind the walls. In April 2017, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for alleged acts of espionage. Recently, the verdict was upheld on appeal. My memories of Xiyue begin with the innocent days of happiness. We met in Hong Kong in year 2009, where I was immediately intrigued by his vast knowledge of the languages, histories, and cultures of civilizations that I almost remotely heard of. Before he left to work for the Red Cross in the war zones in Afghanistan, we spent a brief time together in Beijing. Xiyue brought me to bookstores where he could randomly pick a book from the history section and began telling me stories and anecdotes that captured my attention. He told me that his intellectual dreams began within these books and that one day he would contribute to a historical field that would matter to all. I found him beautiful covered in the smell of the books. Xiyue and I got married in Beijing in year 2012 and had our son Shaofan. However, his experiences as a translator in Afghanistan had left him unsettled and drove him to uncover the deep meanings of the events in Central Asia. I understood that he's a born academic. He could have simply stopped his search, so I put my own career and life at my hometown aside and followed him to Princeton in year 2014, where he had been accepted to study Eurasian history. It has been a devastating year since all of this happened. Our son used to point at helicopters flying above Princeton and claim that Dad was returning home on them. But now he says that that will come when he's grown up. During all the ups and downs in the past year, my hopes for Xiyue's release has been shattered time and time again. I have learned not to weep every time I think about him. I have stopped imagining how he spent his days and how long the next 10 years may mean to my family. My husband's health is deteriorating fast, and I'm very worried about him. I have no other choice but to become a strong advocate for him. My husband was persecuted for his scholarship and criminalized for his American citizenship. America is my husband's adopted homeland. He chose to study, live, and work here because it offers an unparalleled portal to access and share knowledge about this world. Like many scholars around the globe, my husband was attracted by America's promises of academic freedom, and he devoted himself to further these causes both within and outside academia. Will his country stand up for him the same way he stood up for American values? I hope the answer is a resounding yes. The voices of scholars and other academics are united in their support of Xiyue and the intellectual values he represents. But scholars alone cannot secure his release. They desperately need the support of anyone who still believes that learning and the cultural exchange still have a place in this world. They should not stand alone in a fight against persecution of scholars. The US government must help defend the values that attract so many of the world's brightest minds to its shores. Securing the release of my husband would prove a commitment to the freedom of thought, international scholarship, and cultural understanding that Wang Xiyue embodies. 18 days after my husband's sudden disappearance, I received his first call from Prison. Trembling in tears and unable to even complete a sentence, I stood outside Princeton's Firestone Library. After she hung up, I looked down and noticed Sir Henry Wotton's verse carved right into the stone beneath my feet. How happy is he born and taught, that serves not another's will, whose armor is his honest thought, and simple truth his utmost skill. These are the values that brought my husband to graduate studies in Princeton. And I hope that these are also the values that will secure his release and will bring him back to his family and friends. I'm really grateful for all of you coming today to show your solidarity to him. I'm really grateful for that. And I hope you can feel the strength from your support. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Wang Xiyue's advisor, Professor Stephen Kotkin.
I thank the Graduate History Association for organizing this important event, and I hope we can continue our efforts publicly beyond this evening. It won't surprise you if I tell you that Hua, Wang's wife, is a remarkable woman. The fortitude and ingenuity that she has shown over the course of the last 13 months have been astonishing. And she has had to do this, not publicly, quietly, bearing this burden. I ask you to bow your heads for a moment in recognition. I could speak at great length about the remarkable qualities of Wang, as could many of you here tonight. I will say only two things. First, Wang is an Islamophile. He is not a Muslim himself, but he has dedicated his life to the study of predominantly Muslim regions, stretching from western borders of China all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. The second thing I'd like to say about him is his remarkable, astonishing intellectual curiosity and ambition. He set out on a PhD project to compare governance in predominantly Muslim regions in multiple states. His erudition and study covers Afghanistan, Iran, Russian Turkestan, all the way to the Ottoman Empire. That's why he went to Iran, because he wasn't satisfied with a small single country study, as important as that could have been. He had the ambition to compare multiple regions across state borders and had plans after Iran, and we still intend to fulfill these plans to go on to several of these other countries. His Islamophilia, his intellectual curiosity, and his ambition, that set him apart. His emails from abroad, including from Iran, bubbling with all the discoveries he was making and still hoped to make. We wait for him. We think of him every day and every night. We wait for his return every day and every night so that he can resume his work to the PhD and fulfill his remarkable ambition. I thank you for your attention.
Our next speaker will be Professor Janet Chen. Wang Xiyue is one of other academic mentors.
I first met Xiyue actually 3 years ago exactly this week in September of 2014. He was in a graduate seminar with me, and from the first I felt quite simpatico with him, even though our research interests are actually quite different. He is closer in age to me than most graduate students, and he told me he had a young child and wife who would be moving to Princeton soon. We had many conversations about family life and work. I think to date he may be the only male graduate student with whom I've ever had those kinds of conversations. Xiyue is also quite unusual because while my interactions with other graduate students typically consist of nudging, trying to get them to do more work, to read more, to work a little harder, think a little faster. In his case, it was the opposite. I was actually always trying to get him to do less work. He would come to see me, brimming with ideas, with lists of research topics and questions, and then in the course of conversation come up with a dozen more ideas and questions. For his general exams, at one point he was proposing to do what seemed to me to be 6 different fields that he was trying to squeeze into 3. He was going to do Soviet and late imperial Russian history. He was going to do modern China and late imperial China, and he was going to do early and late Ottoman history. I remember telling him, you have your entire life to be a scholar, so this is just an exam, slow down a bit. When his wife and son arrived in Princeton, there was a big change, though not in his enthusiasm for learning. He was clearly very tired, but it seemed like he was also much more relaxed. He stood taller, he smiled more, he was complete. There was one morning in November, I think, when he arrived a few minutes late to class. It was one of those stormy days when the rain seems like it will never end. Xiyue ran in completely soaked. He had carried his young child to the daycare wrapped in a raincoat and then ran across campus to get to class. Although he was wet to the bone and completely exhausted, he was so happy. We were talking about the Cultural Revolution that week, and he was kind of sat through class grinning. A few weeks ago, I had a dream. There were a lot of people at my house, seemed to be celebrating. Some people were drinking champagne. Hua was there, Xiaofan was there, running around, and there was a big banner that said, "Welcome home." Everyone in my dream started clapping, and I woke up with a start, just a minute too soon. I know that I'm not the only one here who has had some version of a dream in which Xiyue returns home. And I know that each of us in our own way sends out entreaties to the spirits and gods above or below, anywhere, to anyone who will listen. We plead, please bring him home.
Next, we will hear from Jane Manners, Xiyue's friend and fellow parent.
Thank you to the GHA for putting this together, and thank you all for coming tonight. As Ariana said, I know Wang both because we are graduate students together in the history department and because we have children at the same child care center here in Princeton. I first met Wang when he was in his first year in the department, 2 years behind me. I met him in the graduate lounge, and I came away from our first conversation astonished at the number of languages he knew, impressed by his dedication to his research, which you've heard about, and awed by the sacrifices that he and his family were making for his scholarship. At that time, his son Xiaofan was just a baby, and Xiaofan and Hua were still in China, waiting to join Wang in Princeton at the end of the academic year. As a fellow parent, I had a pretty good idea of what it meant for Wang and Hua to be apart during the first year of their child's life, and I was profoundly struck by their dedication to each other and to Wang's scholarly path. Professors Kotkin and Chen have spoken about Wang's passion for his scholarship and his impressive dedication to his research. What I'd like to speak about briefly is Hua, specifically her remarkable resilience and steadfastness since Wang was first detained over a year ago. For many months, Wang's detention was not public knowledge, which meant that Hua had very few people to turn to. And yet, despite her extraordinarily trying circumstances, living without family in a foreign country, raising a small child and holding down a demanding full-time job as an attorney, all while struggling to make sense of her husband's situation and to figure out what to do to help him, I never once saw her falter or tear up or despair. In fact, Hua was so gracious and composed and friendly at all times that no one I knew even suspected something was amiss. The outpouring of support that Hua has received since Wang's situation became public is a testament not only to the depth of Wang's Princeton connections, but also to the ties that Hua has created since coming to Princeton. Xiaofan's teachers and the parents of his classmates have joined together to help Hua, as have Wang's fellow graduate students and many other members of the university community. Friends have welcomed Hua and Xiao into their homes, taken them on outings, cooked them meals, arranged play dates, and coordinated this remarkable vigil. I know that Hua finds your communal support both moving and sustaining. Going forward, it's critical that we continue as a community to be there for Hua and Xiaofan, showing our support in ways large and small. Thank you again for coming out tonight, for supporting Wang and his family, and for doing all you can to bring Wang home.
Next, we will hear from Xiyue Wang, a fellow student and friend of Xiyue.
Hello everyone, my name is Xiyue Wang. First of all, I thank you for coming to the Vigil on behalf of Wang Xiyue. And even though Xiyue and I are in different departments, we came to Princeton in the same year, that is 2013. Therefore, we took courses together and became friends. And Xiyue is a genuine scholar who has deep passion for scholarship and especially history. As many of you may have known that before Princeton, he pursued various career paths and displaying his capabilities outside academia. It was the love for history and research that brought him to Princeton. Xiyue is a very caring husband and father. As many graduate students here, in his second and third years, he was occupied with research, coursework, general exams, and prospectus, but he always has time for his family. Every day after finishing his one day's work in Princeton Library, he went home with his kid and cooked dinner for the family. He told me that my wife works in Manhattan and she has to spend 4 hours each day commuting. So I volunteered to cook and I really enjoy it. Yes, he did. He soon became the best cook among friends and even got a nickname, Xiyue Wang. So as a fellow student, Xiyue is an inspiring friend who is always supportive and encouraging. As he's in history department, he took his general exams a semester ahead of the students in my department. He wrote us a long email to share his experience on how to prepare the general exams and how to deal with the stresses it may bring about. Almost 2 years ago, on a similar late summer evening, Xiyue invited me to his home for dinner. Sitting on the couch, I watched Xiyue peeling potatoes and his wife Chuhua reading a book to their kid. It was the most beautiful scenes I will never forget. I do wish Xiyue will be soon released and return to Princeton, where his families, friends, and the teachers are all desperately waiting for him. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Zheng Jian, one of Xiyue's friends from Harvard.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in support of Wang Xiyue, my dear friend. I met Xiyue when we both went to Harvard in 2006, and I've met him since then, and I've remained a very good friend of him for over a decade. When we first met, we always enjoyed cooking together and talking scholarly topics together for a long, long time. After 2 years in Harvard, Xiyue took a non-academic job in Hong Kong, but he has not given up his scholarly dream. And when he had a chance to take vacation, you know where he went? He went to Afghanistan to take a vacation because he was fascinated by the culture of Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, he found some opportunity to work for the Red Cross Committee as a Pashto interpreter. After that, he went back to Beijing and found his way here. We have talked over phone over many years about various aspects of scholarship. Wang, for me, is a language nerd. He knows so many languages, and when he was in Beijing, he will pay personal tutors to teach him Manchu, Persian, Russian at the same time, every week. And even I study ancient Iranian languages, and I spent 1 year in Iran too, in 2009 to 2010. When Wang Xiyue was in Iran, we often talk over phone too about his project, about his studies in Iran. Even after he was put in prison, I often got his phone calls from Evin prison in Tehran. You know what we talk over phone? Scholarship. We talk about Indo-Europeans' roles along the Silk Road, and we talk about his dreams, his actual dreams. He told me that in prison, he will have dreams studying in the library of Princeton. And he will, when he woke up, he didn't know where he was. It's very disturbing for me. I really wish that he could come back and realize his dream and study again in the library of Princeton and continue our scholarly talk. Thank you all for being here.
Our next speaker will be Professor Fawzia Farouki, another friend of Wang Xiyue.
Hi everyone, my name is Fawzia Faruqi. I teach at the program in South Asian Studies, but today here I will talk as a friend of Wang. I first met Wang in 2005 when he was studying Urdu in an intensive program in my hometown, Lucknow, in India. My husband, who was also there, and another American student who already knew Wang because both of them are language nerds. So when my husband introduced Wang to me and I first met him, the first thing that really struck to me about Wang was his warmth and his curiosity about different cultures and his genuine interest in people around him. I remember that the very first day when we met over dinner, he was asking me so many questions about me being from a minority community and living in India, how it is, and so on. So we spent quite a bit of time together in Lucknow in 2005, but then I moved to the US the same year and we lost touch with Wang. But then we reconnected again in 2013, actually 2012 actually, when he came here for the admission process for the PhD program here at Princeton. And then when he moved here for his PhD program in 2013, we really started spending a lot of time together. Actually, before he moved to his apartment in the grad student housing area, he spent a few days with us in our house because the apartment was not ready. And that really gave me an opportunity to know Wang. And I learned that he was not only a very, very bright scholar, he was a very sensitive person. I was very touched personally by the compassion and sensitivity he showed towards my special needs son. We had just received the diagnosis and my son was starting his kindergarten, and so Wang was very, very nice and very kind and towards my kids, and within a couple of days he became my kids' favorite Uncle Wang, and he is still my kids' favorite Uncle Wang. And when Hua and Xiaofun next year, when they joined Wang, we became even more closer because now we had 3 kids between 4 of us. And I can't tell you how many weekends we have spent together cooking and eating. Me and Wang, we both love cooking, and Wang would usually assist me whenever I cooked Indian food while talking about his academic projects. And Hua was also with him, and they cooked more than 100 Chinese dumplings in my kitchen from scratch. And so it was amazing to see a person who was a bright scholar and a very down-to-earth family guy. I would describe him as someone who was a very, very family-oriented person as well. And it is heartbreaking really to know that such a person was thrown into a prison. And I cannot imagine how Hua has been dealing with it. I have seen closely how with the strength and poise she has been dealing with this kind of sudden situation while working full-time, while taking care of her child. And it is hard for us to talk to our kids and to explain why Auntie Hua and Xiaofun, we are meeting all the time, and why Uncle Wang is not here. I don't know how hard, you can imagine how hard it must be for Hua to explain this situation to her 4-year-old. So I don't know, it's very saddening. I feel it's unfair for little Xiaofeng to go through this very crucial stage of his life without his father being around. And it's beyond my power and my expertise, but we are all here. Thank you for coming. I really hope that the situation changes and Wang comes back to his studies and his family. Thank you for being here.
And now I'd like to introduce our final speaker for tonight, Elisa Prosperetti, Wang's friend and colleague.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We've had such a rich sense of who Wang was. If you haven't ever had the privilege of meeting him, I'm sure that after hearing everyone's testimony, you really feel already like you have. I just want to add a few personal details from our friendship to the image in your mind already. He was a very caring and attentive person, as we've heard. So much so that when I was in France for my research in the fall of 2015, within a few hours of the November attacks in Paris, I was not in Paris, but I was in France, he had emailed me to say, are you okay? Is everything all right? Before my parents had sent me an email. A few months later, I was in Ivory Coast to continue with my research. There was a terrorist attack there. Within hours, there was his email, are you okay? His intellectual curiosity did not simply span from Western China to the Mediterranean. It also continued to sub-Saharan Africa, where I was doing some of my work. After our general exams, I went to Florida to study a language spoken in Ghana, Twi. And I remember a few weeks after getting there, he sent me an email that he had composed in Twi to ask me how I was doing. It was stunning. I was taking a class and he knew it more than me. The end of my first year, my birthday's in May, I was feeling quite lonely and overwhelmed. And he knew this. And he surprised me on my birthday. He and some of his friends from China and from Singapore, in a small apartment above CVS, made a Chinese feast for me for my birthday. And he had noticed that I drank a lot of coffee. He had also noticed that I drank coffee of poor quality. And he was a consummate foodie. As you've heard, he's an incredible cook. I've never had better tiramisu. And he gave me, for my birthday, after my Chinese feast, he gave me an Italian coffee maker. And he said, you have to honor your father. You can't continue drinking that stuff they have in the grad lounge. And as his friend, the basis of our friendship was very much both of us being so excited to be here. We all know what an incredible place Princeton is, and especially the people. And I wanted to close giving you guys a sense of his words about how excited he was to be here. I think that it's good to bring his voice to join all of ours. This is an email correspondence that we had in our first year when we were both taking Professor Kotkin's global history seminar, which opened our minds, which blew our minds. We were always emailing each other after, can you believe what was said here? Oh my gosh, read this article. We're just so excited about this. And he said to me, quote, Kotkin's spirit is contagious. His lecture really changes the way I think how a good history work should be written, identifying structural causes and making senses of unintended consequences. Pyramids and Bedouins on camels. It is great. And then we had an exchange where we talked about what classes we might be taking the next semester, and oh gosh, the syllabus looks so intimidating. Will we be able to get through it? These kinds of things. And he said, I'm sure it will be enjoyable torture. Aren't you excited when thinking that you can take the best classes in the best history department in America? I am thrilled.
We have a moment of silence as we think about everything that has been said tonight. And now we're going to have a procession toward Firestone Plaza through that archway. We'd like to have Hua lead the procession, so if you could let her pass through and we'll all file out after her. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Yes. Actually, send it to. I'll send it to I'm writing tonight. I figure I got to have this one.